Good evening. Hello, hello. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and call the Castle Hills Special City Council meeting into order and determine if a quorum is present. A quorum is present. We will proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance. Uh, Captain Wagner, will you lead us? Thank you, Captain. Okay, we don't have anybody here with us. I don't think we have any citizen comments. We will proceed to new business, discussion and possible action, ordinance number 2021-07-22, amending the City of Castle Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 36, related to the sanitation collection services conducted by Public Works. And we're just waiting for Mr. Rapley to get back, and we will get started. Mr. Rapley, we're ready to go. We just read into item 4.1.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Mayor, Council, obviously, if this ordinance looks familiar, it was approved at the last regular council meeting. Kind of after further review and discussion with Mr. Harada, myself, Mr. Zamorone, and Mr. Schnall, we further wanted to tweak this ordinance. Again, the idea of this was to put regulations as far as sanitation collection across the board, mainly in the areas of recycle, curbside, and containers itself. And so originally the red line version you see is what was in your packet, and we've since then added a couple additions which are in blue there. And so obviously what we are trying to do, again, is try to put basically the do's and don'ts of our sanitation collection moving forward. It gives Mr. Harada and his guys the ability to follow a programmed and protocol for our collection of garbage, recycle, and brush. Something I wanted to point out, I left a copy up there, which was a copy from 2009. Apparently, we had similar type of regulations regarding container size and other matters to garbage collection back in 2009. That was under Chapter 13, and my understanding, not too long after that, the city moved to Muni Code. So some of the things have dropped off, which was about 12 years ago. So I just want to give you a background that there were similar requirements by the city during that time. And obviously here today, we're trying to make sure that we solidify those to make sure we have a good document in place, regulations, and we're in the process of actually developing a brochure that we're going to mail out to all the residents before this becomes effective, so they can clearly see what those do's and don'ts are, what the new regulations are across the board with containers, curbside, brush, recycle collections, et cetera. Right now, if there's any particular questions from an operations standpoint, I'd like to have Mr. Harada talk about kind of what he sees out in the field firsthand, because essentially I've just been working with him to assist to draft, as well as Mr. Schnall, but he has, you know, boots on the ground and sees things firsthand that impact the garbage sanitation collection each day. So, Mr. Harada, anything?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I was hoping, there was a lot of residents that were kind of like discussing this stuff, these matters out that field when I was there for this line item. I guess maybe they got knocked out because of the rain, but as Mr. Rapley mentioned, there was in 2009, we had something in place already implemented, then it fell off. But here we've been hammering, Mr. Rapley, myself, and Lewis has really been trying to get on the ordinance here. And I appreciate this time right here to mention the concerns that are out there in the field, that what we were seeing and what's happening with these employees on the safety side, most of all. Yes, it is a process that we need to go ahead and follow through to go ahead and get everybody on the same page, but more so for the safety of the collector. As it sees, I passed out this little note here. I mean, when I first got here across the board, there were 30, 32 gallons all the way across almost. Then it started coming 40, 60s. And then, well, naturally, we started seeing waste management cans because residents that were living in San Antonio were bringing them into Castle Hills. And then we're having to dump these trash cans on the ground to actually pick up the trash to put it in the trash truck because we couldn't put it inside. But that's all it all more concerned. Anything and everything of this process that we're bringing to this line item is, as I mentioned, is the container. I mean, there's limits on your sanitation, trash, garbage pickup. There's limits on your leaf bag pickup, and there's limits on your brush. There's no limits on recycle because, I mean, everybody has recycle. Mostly sometimes people don't even put trash out. So they do a lot of recycling. And as you see that on that line item, as Mr. Rapley put in there, I was telling residents like in 2005, I says, they didn't want all these little bins. I was like, get a trash can, spray iron on it, let's go. And, you know, some of them have 4 or 5 cans next to the one little bin. And, you know, that helped out. But then we had other residents who were having the larger container because they didn't want to have to be fooling around with one bin. So everybody has their reasons. I only have one bag. Well, then you see a sanitation worker going all the way down inside that can. I mean, look at the sanitary side of that for that trash man to be going down in there. But then we had injuries in shoulders, we had injuries in knees. I mean, just left and right. And some of them we didn't even report because, well, yeah, we got hurt for a few days. And we got back on, you know, on the road there. We had to, you know, do the services. But that's pretty much the main concern is the reciprocal 30, 32 gallon. And as the next item is what I mentioned out are the leaf bags because we all have, as I mentioned, we have a limit on it. But then some residents want to use big bags saying, okay, well, we have big bags, but we have the 10 when they're like 60, 70 gallon trash bags and we can't pick them up or we just pick up so much and the residents not too happy with that because it says on the website 10 bags. But then again, they're not listening to or reading the actual verbiage of the 30 or 32 gallon. And then we like to use the plastic bag because the paper bag breaks out. But pretty much anything and everything that I mentioned right now that's all the concern. All the rest is Mr. Rapley has there, and I revised some of the verbiage. Pretty much, hopefully, it goes through, and all the process for all the pickups of service should be okay. Again, it's just the canisters.
one thing I'd like to mention that I should have, Ms. Tedford passed out a copy of flyers for Waste Management, which is a landfill we use. I know we talked about this the other day, as far as our garbage revenue and services and operations. But that's something else we tweaked on this, because again, we wanted to make sure, like for instance, shredded paper, where you used to be able to recycle, is now considered household garbage. But we also wanted to clarify under recyclable materials, because that's what Waste Management tells us, that we can't have plastic bags or we can't have brown bags. Those become garbage. And again, in the big picture, when we get hit with a tonnage bill each month, at least the recycle gives us that credit we can, as long as we follow the instructions of the recyclable items when we take it there, we do get a credit each month on the total tonnage of the bill that we receive.
Rick, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, sir.
I know that you've been out working on the streets because we're a little bit low. Based on what you see on a daily basis, what percentage of people are recycling? I mean, what percentage is recycling versus trash?
I would say probably, you're absolutely right. That is a concern right there. You come out looking at it, as I mentioned, some residents only come with one bag. So you see maybe about 75% on the recycle, and then the rest on garbage. But then sometimes it does get heavy as the pandemic came around. We know that we did have a lot of garbage picked up because a lot of residents weren't eating out. So we did have a big, enormous pickup on that window.
So the recycling is pretty substantial here in Castle Hills?
Yes, it is. I would say, it's just that some of the residents aren't noting as the last, probably 2 council meetings we had passed, that you spoke to a recycling rep, finding out that I thought just black bags, but then it's all bags. And then some of the residents are getting a gimmick here now with the blue bags, saying that those are recyclables, and they're not. And then the Walmart, Home Depot bags, all these are recyclables, but speaking with the rep again, he said that's recyclables for the company. So you take those bags, and I know it came out in the news one time, get your bag, put like 10 bags in one bag, put it in a ball and throw in your recycle. Well, that was that rep I mentioned from Waste Management, said that's a no-go, because it needs to be taken to the store where the bags are from.
And so I guess they fine us for that, Rick?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
how it works?
Yes, sir, because they have to dispose of those. All those bags that come in, paper bags, plastic bags, any carrying bag for that matter. They say they have to dispose of those. At first, as I mentioned, I thought it was just the black bags they had to dispose of, but they're having to dispose of everything.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions for Mr. Gregory?
How are you able to determine at this point in time what is being recycled and what isn't if it's put in a bag?
Exactly, sir. And we're not.
So how can
supposed-
you say 75% of people are recycling
Well, because
unless we're undoing every single bag that you pick up that's so-called garbage?
You're right, sir. And that's the only thing is that we're supposed to know, because the resident, it's that day only for pickup. That's supposed to be recycled. So they're putting them in white bags and putting them inside the recycle bin. But then we're throwing it away. You won't believe this. We're actually throwing it away, and we find a bag that has garbage in it. We're like telling the resident, hey, you can't have this in here. He says, oh, no, just go ahead and keep it, because trash day is tomorrow. They actually think we have compartments in the garbage truck. And I was like, no, we can't do that. So that's what I'm saying, is like the white bag is not a good thing either. But as you mentioned, we can't rip every single bag open saying it's recyclable. We're, taking it that it is, because that's hopefully what the resident is doing for the program.
We don't have the ability to separate.
So it's almost impossible to determine who's recycling though.
Mhm.
Well,
That's what I thought.
Mr. Gregory, I think Mr. Harada's point is he knows if the recycling day is Monday and the trash day is Tuesday, and if there's more on the recycling day than there is on the trash day, that there's more people recycling than there are people throwing trash.
Well, that argument doesn't hold weight at all, because I don't know anybody who doesn't put out the garbage at one time or another, a day or two early.
Oh, there is.
And if they know whether or not it's recycling day or not, I'd be astonished. And
As the mayor saying that, we get more too, that's why you asked me that percentage. We get tons on the recycle. Our recycles are Wednesdays and Thursdays, so you have those 2 days. And that Thursday, when we pick up, after we pick up trash, we have to go by and go pick up, but we're picking up the recycling on the north side, because the south side got picked up on Thursday. But everybody has their recycle out that did not put out boxes like from Amazon or packaging or whatever. They're gonna put in their recycle. So we might have one bin, couple of cans, but we got like tons of boxes because a lot of people order stuff. And so we have a lot of cardboard out there that wasn't put into sanitation pickup.
I know you're looking at me, Rick, I'm sorry.
No.
Uh,
Are those blue plastic boxes still around?
Yes, sir. We sell them here at City Hall. They're $10 for the bin and $5 for the lid. But a lot of the residents are actually buying the trash can, 32 gallon, pretty neat, but they're kind of expensive. But residents want to buy those instead. I just had a resident call me on Zornia. He says, I want to go buy some of those. Can I come over to City Hall and get them? Well, we're not getting them. The residents are actually ordering them online.
Rick, this might be maybe a little bit ahead of this agenda item, but I've seen in other cities that they have the machines that can pick up the trash can and throw it in the back of the truck.
Yes, sir. Mr. Rapley was mentioning that today. I've gone to other municipalities, probably like 5, maybe 6 years back, and seen how their process works with their outside service because they don't have, in-house like what we do. So they have their canister, which is maybe a 40 or 50 gallon can, but then all they do is have a hook and it's on the side of the reciprocal, and that hook will pick up and just dump it out. But as he was mentioning, the mechanics that he was saying you were talking about would be, because we would have to, take everything and change it out for all these, and we would have to actually provide those canisters. So it's like Waste Management does. They breaks, they come replace it. Well, where are we going to keep all those? But he said you mentioned something about actually like it's a flat bed or something that will pick up and they put the can on top.
So the one that I saw was just a regular garbage truck that had an attachment on the back that they connected to the hydraulics of the unit.
You're right, sir.
And so the conversation that I had with Mr. Isbrand is a 32 gallon trash can is just so small. Can't even put a pizza box in there. So that was one of the things that I was curious if you had ever looked at before.
Well, I mean, it could be phased into, but I was just mentioning is the reciprocal. I mean, we would have to actually provide that for the resident because I don't know where they would get it from because they would have that one hook. It's a steel bar that goes across. And yeah, you can, those sanitation residential trucks, they're compatible with that system.
Mr. Gregory?
I'd like to ask Mr. Rapley a question here. How many cans can you put out? Because as I read this, you can put 3 garbage cans full of brush. You can put 1 garbage can in the recycling. And I don't see anywhere where it says in the ordinance how many cans you can put out for garbage. So exactly how many cans can you put out?
You're allowed 3 32 gallon trash cans every day of your trash day. So yours is actually on Tuesdays and Fridays. So you're allowed 3 of those cans. This is where we take.
Does a rubbish, now wait a minute here, because the definitions have clearly been divided between brush, garbage, and trash. You can put out 3 32 garbage cans of brush every time. Not talking about garbage, not talking about recycling. You can put out 1 recycling can, that's 4 cans. How many cans can you put out for garbage?
Again, Mr. Gregory, I think that what we can do here is it says garbage containers not to exceed 32 gallons in size with covered lids. We can add no more than 3 garbage containers not to exceed 32 gallons in size with covered lids. Again, I think in Mr. Harada's defense, over the years, there's never been regulations in place. There's not been regulations in place to enforce for residents to comply with sanitation collection. And that is the intent and point of what we're trying to do here. So if we have to add 3 garbage containers not to exceed 32 gallons, that covers the household garbage collection on those 2 days.
So now we can put out 7 trash cans, 3 trash, 3 garbage, and 1 recyclable.
But not all in one day.
Well, it doesn't say that in the ordinance.
Well, that mentions that on the website, sir. You go on the website.
But we go by the ordinance, Rick. You can put anything on the website. The ordinance doesn't even mention garbage cans. It mentions trash cans and recyclable cans, and that's the count of 4.
So the easy thing to, again, is 3 garbage containers not to exceed 32 gallons in size with cover lids on day of collection.
Okay. And then you can also put out 3 trash cans and you can put out a recyclable can. So you can have 7 cans out there.
As long as they don't exceed the 32 gallon.
A lot of residents have their brush on the ground when you probably go around driving. So when you take that, it states on the website, the 332, the equivalent of 332 gallon trash cans. So what you do is you take one trash can, lay it down, because it's probably 2 foot in height, and it's about 5 foot in diameter, 5 inches long, 5 foot long and 3 inches in diameter. So you're allowed 3 of those piles every Wednesday, except on holiday pickups. So that gives you that pickup of the 3 cans.
Well,
But it doesn't have to be in a can.
this ordinance I think it needs more work on. I should have read this a lot closer the first time. Because this does not say garbage cans in the ordinance. And one problem that a lot of people, you talk about seasonally adjusting things. And it says elsewhere in the ordinance, you talk about seasonal pickup of garbage or leaves. Where is that in this ordinance? Where is that mentioned in the ordinance? I don't see it. Is it there? Did I just miss it?
As far as the leaves,
Well, it says, except as otherwise provided in this article for seasonal collection of leaves. Well, where else in this article does it provide a seasonal difference? Because if you're trying to tell people they can only put out 3 bags a week of leaves, especially we pride these large lots we have of acre, half acre, more. You're going to have hundreds of bags if you only pick up 3.
Each resident is allowed on their first day of pickup. So on Monday pickup, they're allowed 10 bags of any type of trimmings, leaves, grass trimmings, shrub trimmings, whatever, but they're allowed 10 bags. That started back in 1993 when I got here, there were 3 bags, then they changed it to 5. Then it was implemented for a total of 10 bags, as Mr. Rafi said in 2009, but it kind of like dropped off.
Rick, do you remember whether or not that's in an ordinance?
That was an ordinance.
Is it?
Mrs. Harper was here then, and Rita Hoyle was here. She actually went with me in the company truck, and the garbage from our kitchen and leaf bags, and found out.
That sounds like Marcy.
We're needing to up.
so again, Councilman, you know, this ordinance was already approved and we're here just to tweak it a little further based on part of the review a little further by Mr. Harada, looking back at this 2009 that already had regulations in place basically, but it was changed to Muni Code. And then the regulations that we make sure we capture because of the waste management landfill. If you look on the one that I passed out in 2009 there, it said, the collector shall not service more than the equivalent of 3 32-gallon cans on any one call. Shall be provided twice a week, such times be set out by the city. So again, for 12 years, that has been the case, but it's never been codified in Muni Code now. And that's the point of what we're trying to do. And back on the container size, I don't mind as far as if we need to amend on 3630 where it talks about placement of waste for collection, container storage and requirements, which aligns with the chapter here that talks about, again, no more than 3 garbage containers not to exceed 32 gallons in size with covered lids on day of collection. I think that's pretty fair and similar to the 2009 that was done here, that what Rick has been referencing.
Mr. Rapley, looking at Muni Code Online, 3630B says the equivalent of 3 32-gallon garbage cans. So that's already in the ordinances.
Okay. I mean, it can also be applicable here to this section as well, if that's what we wanted.
I don't know that we need the redundancy, but if my colleagues would like that to happen, I guess we can. Mr. Isbrand, yes, sir.
So, Mayor, I don't think there's anything wrong perhaps with the redundancy here, if that's the case, because it's really clear that there's a lot of confusion about this. And, you know, here we are the second time this ordinance has come to us when it was brought to us last week or 2 weeks ago. I raised the question about the vagueness of some language in there, and now we're back to, with yet another rewrite and questions yet about vagueness in it. And I really do think if we're going to address this issue once and for all, if that's possible, that being as specific as we can here would probably be beneficial, so that residents would have a place to come read it if they need it. It would be very clear to anybody exactly what the rules are here, in addition to any education that we might apply along with it. So I don't know how the rest of the council feels on it, but I just feel like we just keep coming back to this trash issue over and over and over again. And if without specificity in it, I think it makes it challenging for us to really go out there and communicate effectively with people about what the rules are.
Mr. Isbrand, I couldn't agree with you more about being specific. I would say that I feel like Unicode is kind of where everything is, but I don't know how many residents are actually going to go through there. I think what's important is that we share that in a nice, succinct, legible way, as opposed to telling them to read 3630B and D. I think we need a one-pager. And one of the things that I share with Mr. Rapley that I saw from the city of San Antonio was they have a door hanger that they use for trash. And I know because I found it at my grandparents' house, but it has everything already filled. So it's up to the people in sanitation to check a box. That way, if they do not get picked up, they know why. And it's one of the things that the guys can carry in the truck, just put a check. And that way it answers the question of what actually is going on.
And to add to that, Mayor, and to Councilman Isbrand's point, is this is the first step to put this in place so that we're all on the same page. The next is making sure the website is in line, making sure we have flyers that are in line, and most importantly, as I was going to let council know later, is we're almost done with this brochure once we approve this ordinance that's going to go out to every resident with an effective date before we start moving forward with compliance. So we want to make sure we have our ducks in a row. As I told you last time, we want to educate, inform, have an effective date. If we necessarily have to move forward with flyers that says here, this is why you didn't get picked up on this day, then we have those in place and ready to go for our guys to let residents know, again, why it might not got picked up that day.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Council? Mr. May.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and get this started. I move that the council adopt the 2021-07-22 as stated.
Thank you, Mr. May. Do we have a second? A second by Mr. Paul. Do we have any more discussion? Mr. Isbrand.
Yeah, I would, before we adopt this, and again, I'll support it despite the fact I think there's some vagueness in it, but I want to ask again the same thing that I asked when we first took this up, that we invest the time, and I've heard you say it twice tonight, Mr. Rapley, and I appreciate this very much, that we take the time to invest in education before enforcement. And we've been very zealous in enforcement, and we haven't been very zealous in communicating to people. And, when that last ordinance was passed, 2 days later, we were dealing with issues in the city because enforcement was underway before the ordinance was even in effect. So I really hope and urge that we will invest the time to communicate with people, because I believe 90% of the problem would be corrected if people simply knew what the rules were, that they would comply with them. Thank you.
I agree, Councilman. And I don't know if you want, and again, since Mr. Schnall's not here, what the effective way of passing this ordinance, if you wanted to add that language under 3630 that speaks to, again, I know we have it in another section of chapter 36, but if you wanted in here to make sure it's from Councilman Gregory's standpoint that the language is in there, I didn't know if you wanted to make sure that was in there and captured in this ordinance as part of the adoption.
Okay, Mr. Joyce.
Well, I support this ordinance, and mainly because of the safety issues. That's the thing that worries me. Even if it's not perfect, we got to make sure that there's a maximum number of containers at the maximum size. So I do support the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Mr. Paul.
I like to approach this in the same manner, but I'd like to ask Rick. you're the person who knows more about this than anybody in the city. Are we missing anything to the best of your knowledge? Do we need to change, fine tune something? How do you feel about this ordinance?
Well, and Mr.
Put you on
Rapp-
the spot, sorry.
Yeah, no. As Mr. Rapley mentioned, this is the first to go ahead and get in it. We have to tweak any type of verbiage, okay? But I know because I've done it with two admins that I had, and we went, I mean, line per line in the website, and it gives all this information that was implemented in 2009. I put it on the website, so it's there, but to put it on here that's what we have to have everything across the board to match. That's what we need to have.
Are
That's
you
all I'm saying.
comfortable
I
with the
guess
way
this
the
is all
ordinance is
saying,
written?
Are you happy with this? being-
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, sir. Most definitely.
See, because you're the man, you're the boots on the ground.
Oh, yeah. No, I am definitely, Mr.
Nobody,
Frank
everybody
Paul,
knows.
I am definitely, behind this. I'm glad we're hammering it more so now, because in the last years that I've been here, it's just been here, say, do this, do that, and just what was on the website versus what an ordinance can help us out with.
Thank you, Rick.
Mr. Gregory.
Mr. Rapley, does this ordinance in any way prohibit one neighbor helping out another neighbor by saying, I've got 5 bags of leaves here, you can put 5 of yours with mine? Or my recyclable can is half full, you can go and put your recyclables in my can too. Does this prohibit that type of neighborliness?
Well, I would think if it's not more than 10, then it's neighborly, from a brush bag standpoint. And then the recycle, if one neighbor has half of it filled, as long as it's in compliance from a recyclist standpoint, some neighbor wants to throw theirs in without plastic and again, compliant to the landfill, then I don't see a problem with it.
Good.
That's already happening right now. That's already happening.
Yes, I know it is, and I just want to make sure
Yeah,
it continues.
We can tell with some of the residents with the bags that they have, bringing them over across the street to another neighbor. And I mean, as long as they comply, I mean, we can't work all night and see who's doing what, but
So that activity is going on at Briarcliff?
yes, exactly.
Okay, well, if there's no other comments, we'll take the vote. All in favor? Unanimous, all opposed? Oh, perfect. One abstaining. Proceeding on to
Thank you, Rick.
item 5.2 or 5.1, I'm sorry, presentation discussion of the preliminary FY 2022 budget for the police department. Mr. Rapley.
Yes, Mayor. So right now, just in the order of presentations tonight, we'll have police go first. Then I'll have Judge McCall go, then Mr. Hada, and then I'll wrap up with a quick presentation for administration. So I'm gonna turn it over to Chief Zuniga right now. He doesn't have a presentation, but he has a handout to speak from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Chief?
Mayor, council, sorry first off for throwing the schedule off last couple of days. But thankfully, everything came back negative. Family came back negative, so we're all good in that aspect. I'm gonna try to go through this briefly. The first sheet in the handout that you have there is just a quick synopsis of all the other sheets that are attached to that, so you can reference that if you need to. The first one that I'm going to is the salaries. I'm asking for an increase in salaries to add a new traffic position to our complement officers. We've had substantial amount of complaints have been received both by the police department, city hall members, and as well as councilmen in reference to speeding motorists throughout our streets. With an addition of assigned traffic unit or an officer that would concentrate strictly on traffic and not other calls that would ordinarily be cleared by shift officers. The traffic officer unit would still, however, respond to calls should the shift officer request assistance or be backed up on other calls, even after prioritization. Currently, we do have a step currently step is available to officers to or at the end of their shift or on their scheduled days off with a maximum of 12 hours that can be worked in combination. Officers, however, are prohibited from working step if they have comped out during their shift or a whole shift. If we were to implement this back, this would decrease the unfunded liability with the city, as well increase voluntary compliance with the speeding traffic or violators. The traffic unit is assigned to a shift on duty for a period of 8 hours versus a step officer is strictly voluntary. The current step unit that we have now is up for trade, our unit 8. If we were to keep it in lieu of trading it in, it's around 50,000 miles. We could convert that one into a traffic unit, which would be no additional cost to the city, except for the salaried position for the officer. I think this was brought up 1 or 2 years ago, and that's basically the only cost to the city is that position. If it didn't work in say a year's time, then it's that we could wash that or however. And then lastly on that, currently police officers are the only ones receiving certificate in education pay. When this went into effect, they forfeited longevity pay. The reason I'm asking for an additional there is dispatchers currently only receive longevity pay and no cert or education pay. We'll move on to the next one. If you have any questions, we can do it then or after. The next one is the comp and overtime, just asking for an increase there. For the last 10 years, dispatchers have only had the option of accumulating comp time, that unfunded liability, without the choice of overtime, which has caused a significant increase of an unfunded liability due to the intermittent shortage of dispatch personnel having to cover the shifts. Police officers have always had the option of receiving OT or comp time. The next one is a decrease in our office and printing line item. Over the last 3 years, this department has only spent about half of the annual budgeted amount for this line item. This suggests that we reduce the amount indicated, not by half, but to allow for price increases, such as the price of copier paper, et cetera, that is still going or climbing. Uniforms, that's an increase there. If we were to take into account, hiring a new traffic officer, outfitting them with the uniforms, the ballistic panels or the ballistic vest, and also taking into account the increase of prices for uniforms. Right now, currently, on average, it's about $77.50 for a shirt and $77.50 for a pant, a slack, and that still doesn't include the price of tailoring the uniform for that officer. The next one is kind of a big one, training and professional. In light of recent events that have occurred around the country, there have been an increased demand for training for law enforcement officers across the country in varying levels. While the department is meeting the demands that are mandated by legislature, we're also focusing on keeping all our members ahead with the mandates, as well as specialized training and electives. Just like everything else across the country that has experienced a price hike for varying items, training is another one of those that experience the same increases. While every attempt is made to locate training locally, there is on occasion where training must be obtained out of town, which adds to the cost of per diem and lodging for the travel. I might add that in 2020, the approved budget was $20,000, and it was lowered last year or for this year to $15,000. Medical employee, again, this is just taking into account, the price increases. That's increasing by 500. The account covers the cost of new hire employees, which entails psychologicals, polygraphs, physicals, and drug screens. It also covers the drug screens that are for random employees that happen throughout the year, and post-accident drug screens that we require anybody that's involved in a fleet accident, they need to take a drug screen. In previous years, investigative evidence testing was also listed under this line item, which accounted for a large amount, but that has been relocated to a different line item. IT support, for the last 3 years, the city has been under the care of IT from a service provider that has been maintaining our IT services. which has proven to be less than adequate. Recently, the city has been looking at changing IT services providers. However, the quoted prices are at an increase of a monthly premium. So I've adjusted that roughly. One of the other things that I wanted to add to this is that we, as a city, we should look at establishing a future purchase line item for IT, so that we're not in the position we're at now. Our servers are failing, and we're looking at having to replace one or two of those. I think that if we had a line item that we budgeted for future expenses on this item, then in 5 years or whenever the term is, that we could go in and replace them all at one time and not piecemeal them as we're doing now. Our radio tower fees, this line item does not have a history, but it was created under a different line item. And this one's just increasing and forecasting the increase in pricing that comes up from the city of San Antonio as we piggyback off of their radio system. The radio yearly maintenance, that one's, suggesting a decrease. This line item is new, however, it has been unused. However, with the aging status of our current radios, there is an increased chances of servicing requirements. So I'm not suggesting that we do away with it, but that we reduce it by a little and as we allow for repairs as they age. And this line item also covers the dispatch consoles. Building maintenance, there has been an increase in maintenance, which includes HVAC, electrical, and plumbing throughout the building. We pretty much all know what the status of the building is. I'm asking for an increase there because we're always having to service these air conditioners, basically. Some of the plumbing, Rick can attest to that. We're always having to call somebody to come work on those. Cell phone radio, this basically just covers the cell phones, our Nighthawk hotspots that are located in the units for the computers, as well as our AT&T encrypted data fax line, because there's still some places that still require a fax and not an email, and we have to maintain that one for encryption. So that's where that increase is coming from. Equipment purchase, small increase, along with other varying equipment. Flares, ammunition is another one. We all know that ammunition is not going, it's not going down in price. It's actually going up. So that's taken into account there. Magistrate fees, this is a decrease suggestion. This is one that has not been used. Just a quick rundown on this. Magistrate fees, when we used to take somebody into custody, we would transport them down to the magistrate's office, which is San Antonio. Since Bexar County built their new detention facility, we now transfer or take all our prisoners to Bexar County. And San Antonio has never charged us for housing a prisoner at the MAG's office. And so now we just transport them to Bexar County. I do not suggest that we do away with this just yet, but I do suggest that we can reduce that line item. Promise we're getting to the end of this. Evidence testing, this is the other line item that was under medical. This one is taking a big hit. Our officers, as a lot of you can see through our Facebook postings and next door, they're getting out there and they're working a lot of these cases, which in turn is collecting evidence that needs to be processed and tested and so forth. So that's an increase. Another one that was included in there's a ballistics. We had that shooting that occurred here at by Demos, I believe, that 7100 block of Blanco. They have to do ballistic testing on that. So that's a big chunk of change out of that line item. That's all that I have as far as the line item adjustments. Real quick, I'd like to just touch up on two other items. These are those two little paragraphs that I've got there. One of them is it doesn't really affect the budget per se here, but I just wanted to introduce it. In previous years, when the police department hosted training, we would do so in the chambers here, putting up a wall of curtains, stacking up and moving chairs, setting up tables and preparing for the class. It was also been a practice that if we had a special meeting that was called such as tonight, we would have to tear down this entire wall, reset up the whole chambers, and have the meeting, and after it concluded tonight or whatever, set it all back up again for tomorrow morning's class. Um, We were then able to acquire a suite over at on the fourth floor at the 1100 block, the tower up here. But we lost our zero-cost suite when that management came in, new management came in, and didn't allow us to utilize that suite any longer. It is our proposal to modernize the community room and reclassify it as a multi-purpose room that will serve primarily as a training room that can be utilized by all the departments in the city for training. The department would have oversight and scheduling, however, ensuring that events such as voting, and other events like that take precedence. It can also serve as a conference meeting room, executive session room, an EOC room, etc. It will still be available for use by the citizens of Castle Hills for their functions. However, an agreement would have to be signed by that person that's reserving the room for use. This agreement is an understanding that new and expensive equipment would now be installed and that the users have a responsibility to ensure that the room is left just as they received it. Voting can still take place in the same room with better access. For starters, a room would have a new ADA compliant door installed for easier access into the room. The fireplace would be removed or covered for full use of the wall. Electronic monitors, which large TVs would be installed on all four walls. No projectors or screens, which would serve for training, but also be programmable to serve in different capacities for weather on one screen, current news, just different things on different screens. And this would work just like the event that we had in February, where we needed an EOC type facility. New classroom style tables would also be installed for better seating, and a new door would be installed to get into the restrooms, basically just closing up the access into the restrooms. Kitchen is pretty much in good shape. The best news of all is the police department can fund this project from a different fund. However, the caveat to this is that the name community room would have to be removed from the wall so they would meet compliance for the funding. And lastly, I know that Chief Ladowig spoke on this the other night. I'll real quickly go on this one, and then I wanted to invite Captain Wagner to come up real quick. Speaking for myself, I have been here 10 plus years with the same retirement plan in place. I have seen a number of council members present and attempt to pass, increasing the current retirement percentage from 1.5 to 1 to 2 to 1 with fail. I've even heard in the past of some council members saying, be thankful to have a job. While I'm in agreement with this saying, I also agree that the retirement benefits must be reviewed and updated to match neighboring municipalities of our size. While the benefit may not affect some of us that have been here a while and are at or near retirement, it will benefit the new employees that are hired as a goal to attract and retain these individuals that we are continually investing in, and then we lose them to other employees because of better benefits. It is a goal of this department and can safely speak for the other departments that we need to retain these employees because of what I stated a few lines up. Some of us will not be here sometime in the future, and some of these new folks need to be here and to take our place to be able to provide more current history to the future that makes up the city. Recently, I interviewed several folks that have been applying for positions in the police department, and when I asked them to recall, if they recalled the fire at Wedgwood, or a major accident in 2019 involving 2 of our officers, or the 28-car pileup on West Avenue exit ramp, they did not have any knowledge of these events. Although it was mostly negative, it is also positive. Some people survived every one of these events. It is that history that has affected this city and should be passed on. Continuous new employees will not achieve this. For some, they have left. Some that have left, retirement is not on their list of priorities, but for others, that is a reason they move on. They're thinking about the future of their families, and continue to remain here will affect them in the long run. With the current events that have been unfolding around the country and around the world, it would be prudent to have employees in all departments that are rooted and invested in their respective departments, and they have a great amount of experience during their stay until their retirement. These folks are what keep the city moving every day. I ask you to please review and consider changing the current retirement system. I'd like to ask Captain Wagner real quick to touch up on that.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I wanted to talk about what I've seen since I've been here. I've been employed by this city since January of 2000. I have a lot of institutional knowledge of our police department and the city and what our residents need. Since 2015, we've had 8 officers leave just to go to another agency. Some of those officers have been to a bigger and better agency, DPS, San Antonio, but the rest of them are going to agencies that we consider our peers or maybe less. Cibolo is an example. An officer that I went to the academy with, and Ram Hernandez, which some of you will remember, he left the Cibolo for absolutely no reason other than retirement. So I encourage you to take the time, really consider 2 to 1. We do exit interviews. These people are leaving because of retirement. At ACOG, at SAC, they are teaching these people to ask about these things. When the chief and I, when we started in policing, we always wanted a job. We washed cars, trying to get that full-time slot. Now, these younger generation of law enforcement officers, they want a place that they're going to get proper retirement from. In the Alamo area region, we got 70% of cities that we compete with are at 2 to 1. We're still at 1.5 to 1. So please, I strongly encourage you to consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add that we did have another officer submit his resignation this coming Monday. So next Friday will be his last day. He's been here 11 years. We'll be moving on to the DA's office. When we asked him the same thing, he says he's going to have about 10 more years in his career and still has plenty of time to think about his retirement. That's it on my presentation, so I'll take questions.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any questions for Chief Zuniga? Mr. You didn't say the name.
I did not, but he's already turned in his notice. It'd be Detective Cheatham, Jim Cheatham.
Detective Cheatham? Mr. May?
Chief, I just have a couple of questions. If I did my math correctly, your overall budget proposal is approximately 3.7% increase, correct?
If that's what the percentage you came up with, that's probably right. I didn't do the percentage calculations.
Okay, well, I'm sure my able councilman here will check my math, but I think it's 3.7. But I noticed here, and it's obvious, the big bulk of this is in the new position, the new traffic position. Is there any data that you could point to that might suggest that having that new position and greater enforcement of our traffic rules could add more income through fines?
I'm going to jump on that real quick, Chief, before you even have to touch it. So that's typically something that happens, but we don't concern ourselves with from the city's perspective. And I'll avoid Chief from having to even get into that. I know that's an often, I guess the questions come up if the position could pay for itself. And I believe it's thought to sometimes break neutral. And that we've seen that a little bit with the STEP department when they do the strategic traffic enforcement program that Mr. Gregory was a part of. Yeah, you started, was it 25 years ago, 35 years ago? No, in all seriousness, I think that's kind of a good indicator for how we will perform with the department as a whole. But Mr. May?
Chief, let me ask it a different way. Because that is the most significant increase, is this a reaction of a perceived lack of enforcement currently?
I don't think that it's a lack of, it's the need to enforce, I guess, for a better way of saying it. Our officers are out there trying to, we've asked them to go and enforce particular areas of the city where we receive the complaints. However, they are also having to answer, the calls that are occurring, and that takes them away from the traffic enforcement. Now, when they come back and start doing traffic enforcement, it's taking them away. They'll concentrate for a little while. Yeah, they typically, cycle around, do a little bit here and then go do something else and jump back and forth. But effectively, if we had one particular officer that did this, that concentrated on that particular speeding or traffic enforcement, that's all they would do. And that would allow the officers to continue doing, patrolling the neighborhoods, looking for porch pirates or whatever the case is, burglar.
So in essence, the new position could be justified by overall crime prevention as well as law enforcement. Is that right?
I would say so, yes, sir.
And Mr. May and Chief, if I may jump in, having been on my fair share of ride-alongs, I understand what the officers do on a daily schedule. They'll start off by doing the patrol buys of homes and businesses. They do every shift, every 8 hours. And then part of that is responding to every single call that they get, whether it's a noise in the backyard, an alarm going off, or something more serious. So between that combination, our department stays pretty busy. When I first got on council, I saw that Castle Hills was ranked as a dangerous place to live. And I remember asking Chief Davis, and he had explained to me that they go off 911 calls. But in Castle Hills, people were calling 911 because they hear a noise, because they see a car, because they see somebody walking through a yard. Our police department is very active, and we have the luxury of them being able to respond to all levels of calls, which is something that I've been touting as a value add to living in Castle Hills. We're not going to just show up because somebody got shot. We're going to show up because you need us to. To that point, I think that having an officer that's dedicated to taking care of traffic, which I've seen personally a sharp uptick in people speeding, I think would be a value add to the city of Castle Hills. I know that we've had a reputation for being very vigilant with that, but as time has gone on, if people don't see the police officers out there pulling people over to remind them of the traffic laws, they tend to forget. And I think that this is important to the city of Castle Hills, and it provides an additional police presence, which also makes people think twice when they're about to commit a crime.
And we can populate some data for you, but however, that we'd have to probably go back to 18, 19 for that data because of slowing down a lot of that last year and early part of this year.
Captain?
What I have here is y'all are welcome to look at them, emails from traffic complaints that I've addressed as a lieutenant starting in 2018. As you see, it's substantial. If you go through them, most of these complaints are during high traffic periods during the evening, okay? And that's all these cross streets. Some of y'all have heard these complaints, Gladiola, North Manton, Sunflower, the list goes on, Northcrest. If our officers are working traffic accidents and we're responding to burglary calls and things on those lines, it takes them away from the duty of trying to enforce traffic. And this traffic unit would be dedicated to that task. And that's where we're going to hope to solve this problem.
Thank you, Captain. Mr. Gregory? I know you have a question in there.
Are we fully staffed in the police department right now?
Right now, we are one position down, not counting the position that's coming vacant this next week. We do have another test date. We actually have one cadet in the academy now. She's been hired. She's working on a reduced salary until she completes she graduates the academy. This other test date that we have coming up, we have, I think, three or four applicants that are also promising. We've interviewed them, a couple of them already, preliminary, and they look promising to where we may be able to fill the one current position we have now. Of course, now we have the detective slot that's coming open, so that means there's upward mobility.
Well, we have 4 detectives right now, don't we?
No.
We have
sir,
3?
3.
Well, it's the same question I asked your predecessor. Why are we adding position when we don't have all the positions filled?
So.
It seems to me that we are getting ahead of the problem right now. And the question also on this position, who patrols the perimeter primarily of the city?
Perimeter, you're talking about the boundary streets?
Mhm.
That's also the officers that we have now. That's part of.
And the additional officer that we get from the state, of which they pay up to 70% of their salary, we pay 30%. So we have somebody that came on about 4 years ago.
I believe that's
That's
incorrect,
federal.
Mr. Gregory.
That's the
Federal,
HIDA.
yeah.
Which,
Primarily for drugs and things like that.
So, Mr. Gregory, he's working across the country. He does not concern himself with the perimeters of the city. of
That's how it
Castle.
was sold to the council.
are you talking about a
The-
HIDA officer?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's a totally different position.
But
That's
it is a
very-
position.
That is correct.
So I'm very opposed to bring on another position when we don't even have the positions we have filled. And I've sat here off and on for many years, and we have this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 that occurs off and on. Sometimes there's down as low as 3, and sometimes we're fully staffed. I mean, it's nothing new. And I just think this is absolutely the first thing we have to do is fill that position that's already vacant and set that position out to traffic control or whatever it is you think it ought to be done, as opposed to getting another position to do that job when we don't even have what we need right now.
So if what we're intending to dedicate is the traffic officer, that would remain totally separate from the complement of officers that we have now that are assigned to patrol. Each shift is ideally supposed to have 5 officers. That allows for officers to take off, come out, whatever the case is during that shift, and still allow for enough officers to cover that shift on each. So right now we're short on one of the shifts, and we try to leave that shift open, or with the shortage, which is the day shift, because we have the detectives, we have ourselves that can, if we need to run out run out the door to help cover, we do that. But the only reason we're asking for this is that traffic officer, that's all they're designed to do. Just strictly traffic. They'll be assigned to traffic only. Again, if an officer calls for help, they're going to respond for assistance, but primarily their duty is traffic enforcement only, aside from the other officers that are assigned to patrol.
One thing I need from you that I asked for the fire department, I need a 5-year spreadsheet going back at least 5 years to break down what every single position is making and has made. This 5-year average doesn't work for me, and we have to know what people are being paid, the progression that is being paid. I need that. I think that's something you should provide for us. The 80% increase that we're being asked, 40% increase we're being asked for comp and overtime. You still think that's a reasonable 1-year increase of 40%?
Yes, sir. At this time, right now, we're at the 6-month mark, and we're right at the threshold, or pretty close to the threshold of that. Going over. That was, I believe, reduced as well in 2020. So and a part of that is taking into account our dispatchers that do not have that option to receive overtime. They are forced to bank their time into comp time, which turns into, of course, your unfunded liability.
Well, not everybody thinks that's a bad idea. And you want to increase by 50% training. And I found that rather amazing. I've always been a fan of training. What specifically is going to be added that we don't have right now?
In reference to the training,
Mm-hmm.
again, that's taking into account all the mandates that are required. Just because we receive one training now doesn't mean that we're done with it. We must continue to retrain every officer every year and maintain those hours. On top of that, new training requirements come out. There's the registration fees. Again, there's some areas where, and this year alone, because of myself and the captain's promotion, we had to seek out training as command staff. So that, took up some of that training as well, and that budget line item.
Well, I'd like a little more than just say, in a spreadsheet, we need 50% more, trust us. We just need 50% more. I'd like to have it shown where it is going. And just to say they're mandates doesn't mean that I need more information on that. The other thing on this is equipment and building, the equipment maintenance. Are any of these things that you have in this, that you've given us, are any of these things, can they be funded by the Crime Control Prevention District?
They already do on some of these items. On some of these, I have to go back and pull their sheet. I don't have it in front of me, but they already cover a few of these items, but the majority of it is equipment.
So if, for example, the radio maintenance, I remember sitting in there when we completely changed around all the radio, the walkie-talkie or whatever it was called at the time, because San Antonio decided they were going to change theirs. We had to change ours. Why is all this in the budget for you as opposed to something you present first to the Crime Control Prevention District?
Because again, they're covering the equipment aspect of it, just like all of our units. They cover all our patrol cars, all our unmarked vehicles. That is not picked up by the general fund.
Well, it says here, equipment, fuel vehicle equipment, maintenance equipment, vehicle maintenance. I mean, all this, it says equipment. The whole line item is equipment, building maintenance. Why isn't all the equipment stuff paid for by the crime control and removed? See, that's why we have the crime control district. We removed having to pay for the cars.
Well, they pay for the vehicle itself, but then we have to take the maintenance and so forth of that it's coming out of the general fund.
Mr. Rapley, that cannot come out of crime control. I don't know why it can't.
Again, I think we can look at the statute, but it does right now provide from a building maintenance standpoint, being the department housed in the facility allows for some funds to be utilized for maintenance. I think as the building itself, I'm going to cover most of that in my presentation later on.
Because I'm looking at IT support, under IT support, tower fees, radio maintenance. If you are some way able to remove all these things and let crime control pay for it, that is 29, 35, 70, that's over $100,000. And that by chance would cover the adjustment, the increase that you're looking for, $100,000. So
I think we can look at it, but again, like for instance, I'll give you an example, IT services, it's kind of broken up proportionally between the departments and CCPD for some utilization by the police department for IT services. So if there's something we can do that could be a shared cost, we can look at that. But again, I don't know how much we can utilize specifically because it does just allow for maintenance of where a police department is housed in your city.
Well, I do think that this ought to be scrubbed and found everything that the crime control district can pay, they should pay it first if they have the funds.
Well, again, I think if you want to wait till mine, we're going to get into HVACs and IT later down the road.
The other thing that I have a real problem with, we're a little town. We have one little community room. We have Christmas parties given by various organizations there. I'm with a group that plays bridge there once a month. There are other people that go over there. The Historical Society meets several times. we're a little town and it's the only place you can gather. It's a small area. You basically want to eliminate it and come it under your provision of it's going to be a training room now. And if there's any damage for anybody who uses that room, if the garden club or has a Christmas party and they damage something, they got to pay for it. And the users have a responsibility to ensure the room is left as it was received. Classroom style tables and chairs. We have these chairs, which are extraordinarily nice, used for in there. I can't imagine that you're upgrading a classroom chair as an upgrade from this chair. But the fact is, you're calling it modernization. It's reclassification, and it's elimination of the only place in the city little groups can get together and do whatever they want to do without.
If I may, you apparently weren't paying attention because I did say that that would still be available to everybody across the city.
Well, that is available now, but you don't have to get approved by you. The way it's done now is if you want to use the room, you go in and ask them, they have a book. Is it empty at that time? Sure it is, go on in there. You
Again,
don't have to get approval by the police department.
So again, I think.
It was
use the
just
room.
it was only a suggestion on our part. Again, it's no loss on our end. If we don't do anything with it, it can stay the way it is.
Well, it sounds like this is a good idea for how we may utilize space here in this room that we're not utilizing. I know
Again,
we-
Councilman, I think that this was part of the discussions we had as part of the Emergency Management Committee to identify a room that could be
Yes.
utilized for an EOC. I think what the chief is trying to say is groups, organizations can still utilize the room. If the funding is there and utilized for it, it just can't say community room. It could be something else, but the organizations could still use it. We do everything electronically now for reservations, so it doesn't mean the garden club couldn't utilize it at some point. It would just look a little different with tables, chairs, audio, video improvements in there, and no fireplace. You would
And
just
you
take
cut off the bathrooms.
Well,
Didn't you want to shut down the bathrooms?
No,
I
sir,
think
that's
that,
not
No,
what I said.
again, I think we're getting a little off topic here
Okay.
from that standpoint, but I think the idea that it says community room when you walk in is just taking that off there as identified as a community room. Doesn't mean that other organizations or groups within the community couldn't utilize it. We're still going to use it for elections, so on. It's just going to be utilized majority of the time for training purposes, because we do host a lot of training, whether it's police, fire, and other organizations that come here. It's just a matter of modernizing and upgrading it from a standpoint of using it for audio, video training purposes. Again, I don't think that is what we're saying is going to happen, but it's just an idea right now.
Well,
And I'm
all
in
I
no way
know is
implying
that
that any
once
of
you get the
the,
camel's nose under the tent,
the what?
once the camel's nose is under the tent, you've lost it.
Well, and I'm not in no way implying that any of the other organizations are going to go in there and destroy anything. I know that we've had children running around, that have some small event that involves children. That's where I'm talking about the care of the room.
I have to assume to some extent, Chief, everybody's responsible for damages somewhere. I'm not sure where Mr. Gregory got some of those assumptions from, but I think the only change would
From
be
what
the
he
community
wrote.
name. Mr. Joyce, you have some comments?
Thank you, Mayor. For me, the takeaway on this issue is that the police department needs a space that they don't have now for training, for EOC and other purposes the chief lined out, and we need to work on that. Maybe the community room is not the best idea, but that's something, working with our committee on the comprehensive plan, we will take into consideration and hopefully maybe make some other suggestions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Isbrand.
Excuse me, Chief, question. I presume you wouldn't be asking for a traffic enforcement officer if you didn't see a problem that needed to be addressed. Is there a way you can generalize for us here tonight? Is most of the problem you see, or let me ask it this way, are most of the citations that officers write for violations within the residential areas, or are you seeing it on the major thoroughfares, the perimeter streets? Do you have a sense of where the biggest issues are?
For the the majority part is going to be the major thoroughfares, military, Vance Jackson or Jackson Keller, Blanco. Those are the big thoroughfares. We do see some issues in some of the residential areas running stop signs and so forth, but usually what happens is when you have somebody stationed there for 1 or 2 days, 3 days, it kind of clears up the problem for a little while, and then they stop seeing the car there and it starts again. So we kind of hit it. One of the other things that we're looking at in residential areas is maybe setting up a decoy car, whenever we can, setting up a unit on the shoulder somewhere and, helping that while we don't actually have a physical
Right.
officer on site.
Right. And Captain, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't know based on the pile of papers that you held up, but are most of the complaints you get related to residents concerned about speeding in the neighborhoods, or is it echo where the citations are being written on Northwest Military or whatever? Do you have a sense of what you hear there?
Well, I think that most of our complaints that if a resident's going to is going to take the time to call, it's because of something that's going on in their neighborhood. So yes, I see the complaints being mostly in the neighborhoods, and that's where we need a dedicated officer to address that. Because like I said, our officers, if they're tied up on calls that have more priority, they can't sit on a stop sign or sit running
Sure.
stationary radar on Honeysuckle, on Gladiola, and address those problems.
Do you all think that a uniform residential speed limit in Castle Hills would in any way benefit the effort to calm speeders in the residential neighborhoods?
Well, most of our speed limits are 30 in the residential areas. There's a few streets that are 25. I think a speed limit sign is a speed limit line. That is your notice. As a driver, that's how fast the speed limit is. And if the driver's paying attention, they see a speed limit sign, then that's what they're supposed to abide by.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any further questions for Chief Zuniga? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We'll move on to 5.2, presentation discussion of the preliminary FY22 budget for court. Mr. Rapley.
Thank you, Mayor. Judge McCall is here to present and give a quick overview of court. You should have a presentation in front of you. And Mayor, if you can load it up on the shared screen, should be ready.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, City Council, Mr. Ratley, how are you? Trying to see what the volume would be if they got the traffic officer. Did it for you and Johnny. Okay, that's cool. Okay.
Mr. Rapley, I don't see the presentation here.
How's everybody doing today? I feel like I'm at a appellate court, Kurt. I'm just waiting for things to get fired at me here. I won't, while he's loading that up, I'll try not to take too long. I can say our budget, I'm going to try to give you all an idea of where the court's at right now, but our budget shouldn't change much from what it was last year and the year before. This past COVID year, I did what we could to keep up, right? So typically us and the prosecutors, we're contracted or scheduled to come between 1:30 and 5. This entire past year until currently right now, we run 2 Zoom dockets on the court date so we can get to everybody, and we're keeping up. We're not behind at all. In fact, with some cases that we brought in with warrants and stuff, which I'll show you guys, we've settled more cases than or disposed of more cases than have actually been filed in the court this year. But I couldn't promise for the prosecutor, but I did we together made standing orders where the judge can do a few things and then they're doing some things and then we sign off on them. But then I come in at 9 o'clock instead of 11 and I work until sometimes 5:30 or 6 o'clock. So we've kept it going with Zoom. We sign everything electronically. In fact, there's a couple of people in TMCEC that says between our clerks and what we do, we've got it down better than most courts. But I won't, some of this is from the presentation that we did last year, but as y'all know, our mission statement is to efficiently and accurately, professionally handle, process Class C misdemeanors, parking violations, city ordinance violations that are filed in our court, and to create and sustain customer service oriented and quality service. I can't remember, and anybody here can tell me if you've had it, but I can't remember when the court staff has gotten a complaint. I'm really big on, hey, we're independent. We're going to talk to people like we want to be talked to. And I try to point out at any point in time if we get compliments. There was a resident in here the other day, and started talking to her, and she got a speeding ticket, and it's a very nice lady, and she was telling me, well, you know, the officer that gave me the ticket, he was a sweetheart. He was really nice. It was early wine. And I was like, okay, well, I appreciate that. You know, we worked something out with her, and then I saw the chief walk by. I said, hey, there's the guy that's responsible for it. Talk to him. So she felt good that she could talk to the police chief, and then she started talking about her calling at night, which I were talking about earlier, the 911. She would hear a noise and she lives by herself, and how quick these guys get out. Take a look at things for her, ease her mind, and take off. So it's really nice. So if we get that, I tell Tina, and then I try to do it. We try to send a note to the chief or whoever they're giving the compliment on, because it's, you know, you don't get too many compliments. Typically, people want to complain when they come in, but try to handle it all in with as best in as much customer service and professionality as we can, and it's worked. We efficiently move things now. So that's really big with me, and I couldn't be prouder of Tina. And we got a new clerk. I introduced her the other day, and she's working out okay. You know, she has experience. There's a lot of things that are a little bit different, but other than our I think payroll difference between salaries and the new clerk, it's a dollar or somewhere in their difference. But other than that, the budget should still be the same. As you guys know, and I won't bore you with this, we're Chapter 29 court. We became a court of record in 2017. So I can issue search warrants, seizure warrants. We can issue civil abatement orders. COVID kind of put a little bit of a damper on that, but that's something really nice. Somebody's got a car in the front yard. You're tired of looking at it. Code compliance goes out there, cites them, goes through the process, sends the proper letters. They can actually file a civil case like you would file in district court. We have concurrent jurisdiction with district court on these things, injunction case, and I can actually hear the case and issue an order to remove it. We can actually remove it, and then at some point, and also charge them if they don't remove it. We can give them the order to do it. If they don't do it, the city can remediate it, and then they get a bill for doing it. So that works out really, really, really well. And I'm, as most of you guys know, I use civil law. I'm comfortable doing that too. So it's been, you know, pretty interesting. But last year kind of put a damper. We weren't having any, you know, too many of those type of violations because people weren't going out and doing that. So court personnel, as you know, there's me, the judge. We have the prosecutors. I talked to the prosecutors a couple days ago just to find out. I tried to talk to all of the vendors that we had during the court. They said that there will be no increase this year in what they charge. The security company said there's no increase. The Zoom court, we have been saving money because I don't have the 2 security guards in here, and I don't have my bailiff in here. Rich comes, but that's about it. So that's worked out okay. We have our court clerk and our deputy clerk. I'm responsible for supervision of the personnel and ultimately responsible for what they do. I preside over the proceedings. I do magistrate duties, and I'm responsible for issuing process. Tina's in charge of all of our court records, everything. So she's in charge of those. She's in charge of the destruction policy. That's her baby. And she does a clerical work. And the deputy clerk, she assists, you know, people in resolving their citations and basically whatever Tina needs. So that's the staff. We're small, but I'm really, really happy. Tina's a level 3. As you know, she left and then came back, which I was really happy to have her back. She's really, really good. She knows more than the young lawyers that come in here about municipal court procedure and things that go on. She's really, really good. The next page is court statistics. Prior to going to Zoom court, what I'm having them do is call it, because for Zoom, you got to call them The officers, it takes too much time for them to get this emails out on the side of the road. So we try to call them, we get the email, we send them an invite to the court, and we tell them, hey, you have the same rights you have in this court as you have in regular court. We operate under the same decorum. We need your email. You have a court date today. Well, prior to that, we were having like, I don't know, 12% of the people take care of their stuff prior to coming to court. They'd either come to court to take care of it, or they just wouldn't take care of it all, right? After we started making those calls, roughly on an average, about 36% of the people that get cited started like taking what we call a window deal. Myself and the prosecutors have worked out an arrangement to where basically I'll sign off on it and he approves it, that the clerks can offer a 90-day deferred, right? They have to, and it's full price of the citation, but it switches from a fine to a fee. And if the people promise not to get any traffic tickets during a period of time and they get that paid, they get a dismissal and move on down the road. So we've got a uptick in people taking the window deals, and we still have 40% of them appear on the date, 36% take care of it prior to that, and we've got about 24% of the people that don't show up. I went ahead, and I think this leads into some of the stuff that you guys are talking about. Y'all know that I can't talk about like profitability and all that stuff, so I'm going to talk about cleared cases and different things. So this, I pulled from our database total violations filed in 2017 through 2021. So it's amazing because 2017, 8114, 2018, 8107, 2019, 8190. It's pretty consistent. I mean, it's actually kind of amazing that it's that close. And then in 2020, COVID hits, and for the entire year, we did 3,602 violations total. That's not stops though. That's violations because on an average, and I'll explain a couple of things to you guys in a minute that kind of go into your traffic officer thing. On an average, people, it sounds stupid, but they get about 1.7 tickets per stop, roughly. I did the math for like the past few years, right? So, and then right now, as of 6/1, we have 1,992 violations written, which if you project it out, if it stays at the same, then we'll roughly be right at about 4,000 violations, which is about half. But again, when you're down in staff, when we have the COVID stuff going on, it makes a difference, right? So if you're curious as to how those citations break down, the next page, which is breaks down that we've got the sum of the traffic tickets, some of state law violations. State law violations are going to be other violations other than traffic, failure to appear, could be assault, possession of drug paraphernalia, different things like that. So you can see how those break down. The majority of them are traffic violations. Then, you have 1,226 basically state law violations. A lot of those are going to be FTAs because if you do the percentage, you can see that's about the percentage that are going to go to warrant, right? 93 of them are going to be ordinances in 2017, and 40 are going to be some parking tickets. So that gives you guys a breakdown, and I don't, unless you want me to read them all back to you, you can see that. I just wanted y'all to be able to kind of see where the court was sitting. The next page is my talks about Rich a little bit. 2017, he cleared 4,140 warrants, 3,700 the following year, 3,495 in 19, 1,693 in 2020, and so he's already at 1,660 this year, clearing the warrants because we've got a little bit of, little bit of time, less front end means there's more time to grab some of the old back end stuff because it's sitting there. So that's how your warrant statistics break down. Total cases cleared, that's total cases disposed by our court. For 17 was 6815, for 18, 6448, Again, pretty darn consistent, 65, 84, 419, 2020, 32, 23. And as of 6/1, give or take a couple of days, we had already cleared 24, 28. If you go back to the first page where I showed the amount of cases that were filed that time, you kind of notice that we cleared from 17 to 20, so anywhere between 83 and 89% of the filed cases. And 2021, we're at 121.88%. That's because in order to keep our clearance rate going, we've been clearing some warrants, and the warrant officer's been out there, so it's kind of pitching in to kind of make the numbers look a little bit better. So during the pandemic, I kind of mentioned it. We're doing virtual hearings. We're e-signing documents. Y'all approved a right signature program. I think I got it when the pandemic first happened, just got it, but it's been a godsend. We use it a lot, and it's really helped us clear things and get things done. People sign and we get the documents back and case is closed and we just move on down the road. We've got a decrease in the failure to appear violations. I think it's because of the phone call. In the end, I have a wish list. I think I asked y'all for it before, but then COVID happened, but I'd love to have a phone dialer for two reasons. One, we have to have, can you go to the next slide? Oh, no, that just starts with that. But we have to call everybody before we have to call everybody. And when they have a show cause, we have to bring them in. Used to, if they didn't show up, you just issue a warrant. Now we can't issue it, or like a KPS, we can't issue it until we take we have to give them basically 2 shots. But I was reading the law and looking at it, phone call from the phone dialer to say, hey, you need to be in Castle Hills, you missed your court date or whatever, that will count, and it will allow me to press the cases and be more efficiently. I can move them on. I'm not have to worry about if they didn't show up, then making the other phone, because we can remind them with the dialer. And then on top of that, I want to start reminding people, the new clerk we've met, me and Tina, and with the new clerk, we want to have her start calling on all the dockets because it's worked so well. We might as well keep doing it because it just makes the whole show more efficient. As you know, when citations come in, there's these little funds. Y'all have heard them and probably seen the light items. You have the Child Safety Fund, and I kind of went through to explain those to you guys. I don't know if you want me to waste your time on that, but these you can use the money for crossing guard programs, promote child health safety programs, child abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse prevention, things like that with the Child Safety Fund. The Court Technology Fund, we've used that and used it in the past to buy electronics for the courtroom or different things that we need. I think some of the stuff that maybe we use here in City Council, we kind of, we use it in the court and you guys use it here. So that's a little bit of each one of the citations that the guys write. Municipal Court Security Fund, that's another little piece that comes out that is earmarked for court security stuff, the bulletproof glass, the magnets and to check people when they come in. And we can use some of that money, I believe, for the security officers that we hire that aren't policemen that are sitting here. And then you have the efficiency fund as well. And basically prior to 2020, there was a $25 time payment fee. If somebody if they didn't do a deferred, if they wanted, hey, I want to plead guilty, I just want a payment plan. If they went over 30 days, we'd charge them $25. Well, and then the state got a portion of it, and the City Council got a portion of it. Now, as of January 1st, 2020, the time payment fee, it was reduced to $15, but the city gets to keep all of it. So that kind of changed. And couple of other things lowered. It didn't make much difference to the city, but there's a couple of other things that lowered, like the compliance dismissal. One of them's $10, one's $20. But other than that, that's the efficiency fees. I wanted to tell you guys, I used to be a policeman in my past life, but when they had the council meeting for that they'd possibly get a traffic officer, and so I went ahead and ran the numbers because I was looking at volume. Are we going to be able to handle it? Which the answer is yes, but But my calculation looking back, I think I went back to 15 or 16 forward. My calculation was, and there was a little bump when they took away the MVI. I think the policeman can tell you before when the motor vehicle inspection ticket was there, they'd pull people over for that, and you might get a registration in that and no insurance, right? So the number of tickets kind of skews a little bit. They take that away, the registration thing, you can see it, it's right there in your face because it's inspection sticker used to be right there, right? So you get that. So there's a little bump, but it didn't make a big difference. So it looked like to me that people were getting about 1.7 violations. So I told Tina, I said, look, 1.7 violations, and you have a guy, if he's a ticket writer, and they know what I'm talking about, somebody that don't like to do anything but write tickets, right? Then I said, we can expect probably a couple of hundred more tickets a month if he's working 5 days a week, right? If they got one guy, right? That's volume wise. You guys are gonna have to adjust for that and you're gonna have to do it. And then again, I don't remember exactly when they talked about it. I think COVID hit and it kind of fizzled out, but we were just making sure because we were, you know, kind of thinking, okay, how are we gonna process this? We got everything moving really, really quick and efficiently, and let's look at it. We just wanted to manage the load. So from my calculations, that's what that looks like. So if I think didn't I send you a spreadsheet one time or something? Maybe at some point in time. Yeah, I might.
I'm not sure, Judge, but I'll follow up.
I might have sent one just talking about it. But if they can find it, you can look at it, and I could always rerun it again, and you could see the amount of cases because I'm concerned with the volume, right? See what it was going to be. So going to there, I have a wish list at the end if we can. I know we've saved some money on not having all these people in, but I talked to the auditor last year when they came in, and the only chink in my cash control plan, and Douglas, you know this, you're in business, is my clerks need their drawers to lock where nobody else, not that we're worried about anybody taking anything, but just talking about cash control. I've got things in place where they each count each other's drawer. We have a sign off on it when we deposit our money with the city, because there's kind of a little legal fiction going on there, right? We're supposed to drop it in the, you know, at the bank or whatever. The court should be, I mean, technically if we were bigger, that's probably what would happen. But since we're a small city, all the small cities do that. We basically deposit our money with the city and then they deposit it and put it on the ledger and do whatever. So if I have the locking cash boxes, then my cash control system is down. We have our deposit with the city, the slip that Tina's getting. We have them signing off on each other's deal. Now, if nobody else gets into the thing, I mean, I'm not trying to stop a bank robber. Somebody's brave enough to come in here and like break into my cash drawers, and oh well, you know, that's Wayne and the chief can deal with those guys. But just for cash control, then I think that satisfies all the auditing. And then we had talked about before a through the wall drop safe to go back in that corner somewhere where it's outside. So if we do get somebody that wants to come and take care of their thing, there'd be like a little envelope thing out there and they can drop it in. Again, talking about cash controls, it would need to drop through there and just, it's locked. And then Tina goes and checks it every morning and gets it done. Other than those two things and a possible dialing program, I think the court's where it was at before as far as budget goes. I mean, you're always going to hear me say we should pay Tina more money, but you know, that's up to you guys and not me. It's not my money, but she's fantastic. So if you guys have any other questions, let me know.
Mayor, council, real quick on the requests, depending on costs, and there's been some savings obviously in the court. We may try to purchase those this year to get those in place. So I'll look in that feasibility.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Do you have any, Mr. Esbrand?
I think I could do it for less than $1,000.
Judge, question for you.
Yes, sir.
Given the note that you made here on the decrease in failure to appear violations,
Yes.
if and when we ever get past the pandemic, do you anticipate continuing to have some kind of virtual court when you see things like this take place? Or what's your thought of how it goes forward?
This is what it says. You know, the deal is, and we have it down. I mean, I think the mayor's watched before, but I can open up like 9 breakout rooms and I'll have people show up And then I'll get a few there and I'll say what I have to say, right? And then let me put you here, boom, 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 boom. And then we pop in, Tina pops in with me, I leave her and I go to the next one, then we go down. And the prosecutor's using the same thing. The new order that came out says we are to try to do virtual court for as long as we think that we can do it, right? The problem is if we get volume back like we used to have, I can't get enough, because again, like I said, to do it, I'm here like all day long, and I have to have him running another one. Technically, we should be together, but like I said, we're working on standing orders. So I think right now, volume-wise, it's good. If volume starts to increase and the Supreme Court's okay with it, then eventually we'll need to open back up just to keep the volume, because we can see more people if we're here. But I'm not opposed, and I told Tina that city ordinance violations or anything, it's always can be an option, and we can do it because we've got it down. It's easy. The state provided the program. It's free, and you guys are paying $81 a month for us to have the DocuSign program, which is much cheaper than the Adobe one, and we can do it all day long. So, I think after she's on vacation, so when she comes back, I think the court after she comes back or the following, we're going to bring in a bunch of ordinance violations, and I'm gonna have them show up all at one time, and I'm gonna have the prosecutors on there, and then I'm gonna hope the breakout rooms, and then I'm gonna say what I have to say, put them in there, and see if we can get all of those things taken care of all at one time. So we're thinking about trying a jury trial just so we can say we did it on it, just to do it, but it's working great, and until you guys tell me, hey, get back in here and do it, or the volume gets to where I have to do it, then we'll just keep trying to save the money and do what we can do.
Any other questions for Judge McCall? Okay, thank you, Judge, so much.
Thank you very much. It's my wife's birthday today,
Oh.
and they're texting me, Dad, where are you at? I said, well, Mayor Trevino, maybe show up to this meeting tonight so you can talk to him.
We appreciate your service.
He does that on people's birthdays, I should tell you,
I know.
Judge.
Anyway, you guys, thank you very much for everything. I appreciate it. If y'all have any questions or follow up or anything, get my cell phone number from one of these guys and call me. I'm more than happy to talk about it. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Is it Rick?
Do you guys mind if I go ahead and go?
I think you're a good judge. Thank you.
The next presentations will have Mr. Harada for the Public Works.
Mr. Rapley, since it's not on the agenda, is that going to be all right? I imagine it's probably not.
Yeah, I think we shifted the agendas. Let's go ahead and,
And we need to proceed to administration.
yeah, since I guess when we canceled that one, it got truncated on the agenda, so.
But I'm glad you joined us, Mr. Harada.
So what we'll do is I'll look to have a special council meeting next week. We might try to have the audit accomplished by then as well. So Mr. Harada can take care of that before we provide the proposed agenda on August 5th. So
Okay.
I want to make sure he gets his time in front of y'all. So he has a couple requests. So,
Okay, in that
sorry
case,
about that.
we'll proceed to item 5.3, presentation discussion of the preliminary FY 2022 budget for the administration department.
Okay, Mayor, Council. I was gonna have Mr. Zamarone take care of this, but I'll go ahead and do it. I'm just kidding, Louis. So, specifically what I wanted to do, and I've compressed the administration from last year where it was kind of a little bit more in depth, but I wanted to make sure, because actually some of the goals we had last year and some of the functions of our administration department, we actually took care of and addressed. These are kind of areas that we wanted to still look at moving forward. Let me see, go back. So just real quick, the service areas, some of the positions that you are aware, so you're going to be aware of what's in the administration department. Some quick goals, prioritize needs, municipal facility, as in this building, and then IT infrastructure. So the area of service, obviously we're driven with customer service. That's our focus across the board with administration, because we touch on various residences and businesses, whether it's development services, issuing permits, whether it's city secretary, finance, or even passports now. So, that's sort of our main goal, is being customer service focused across the board. Permit and development services consists obviously of issuing permits, but a large part is the plan review, coordination, and inspection as that process unfolds from start to finish. Code compliance, we have a very good code compliance officer here. She's done a great job so far. Not to say the predecessor didn't do that as well, but we're again moving forward. One of our goals was to get the residential brochure out to educate residents. We got that accomplished. I've heard a lot of positivity from that. So this is what we'll do, similar to the sanitation collection moving forward. City secretary, records management. As I mentioned to some of y'all, when Ms. Tedford came aboard, the record management system, not to say it was obsolete here, but it needed a lot of work, especially here in this building. She's been doing things in phases and moving forward through phase 2. But part of that is we have taken records and put them off-site storage, environmentally controlled. We have basically a list if we need some kind of document, and they send the box over. If something happened to this building, we would lose the records for good. At least with all our records, historical records have now been all placed in storage. And we did not have fees each month for that, but we are going to put them into the budget moving forward. So we have that, which is a record storage fee. Is that correct, Ms. Tedford? Yeah. Inventory for storage of records. And that's a pretty big accomplishment, because the cities I work for, and majority of cities, their historical records, original documents, are usually in a safe and controlled environment. Again, this building, and if something were to happen, we'd lose those records for good. Now they're in a safe place. And I appreciate Ms. Tedford, because in the 7 months, she's done a monumental job in that. Finance is our internal customer service. I like to refer to them. That helps with processing payroll and making sure everybody gets paid every 2 weeks. It's a huge task every 2 weeks. And then passport services. Obviously, I mentioned the other night, we've seen an uptick. It's funny because we have a hidden gem here in Castle Hills with passports. Other city managers I know and ask us in smaller cities and surrounding area, ask me how's that passport thing working out? I say horrible. Horrible. So I do not want them to take that services, because it's a percentage that would go away from us. Right now, you either come to us or you go downtown or go wait in the post office. And so when you can come get a passport in 15 minutes, whether you're a resident or outside of the city, I've heard nothing but positive feedback. And I think one day it'll be very, very more successful in the revenue and, a dedicated position moving forward. Some of our goals and priorities, we kind of touched on those last year, especially in our permit and development services. When we had to close the doors because of COVID, we've tried to push for online as much as possible, getting your permit. And one of the things we're still looking at from a functionality standpoint is how we can fully automate or electronically submit plans online. And so we're kind of looking at other cities do this, and then have sort of the automation or the module for someone to pay for those online. And part of that would be if someone submitted their plans, they would be able to track the process all the way through to inspections. So, we're still looking at the feasibility of this. That's something that's been my goal, Mr. Zamaron's goal now, to do things more efficiently. And we never know if we ever have to close the door again, that we want to be able to not stop the permit and plan review process when we can just have someone go online, complete the application process and pay for it. It would help tremendously. I don't think for our plan review has changed. We're still doing 7, 10, 14 business days, depending on it. Again, we've seen an uptick on permit requests for commercial as well. So I'm hopeful, as I mentioned the other night, with the revenue. Finance. I know we've talked about this again, centralizing the city's financial system. And you're going to hear it again from our auditors that we're going to get dinged again that we don't have a centralized financial system. Whether that is in code or something else, right now, courts, permit do not speak and communicate to each other. So we have susceptibility and liability in that area right now, and that's something we need to fix. Again, I don't need to revisit this, that I tried to fix it 3 years ago, but we will move forward, and it is my goal to centralize that no matter what system we choose, whether that's in code or something that integrates, or a module that speaks to one or the other, so that we're all on the same page moving forward. City Secretary's office, like I mentioned, record management system, going to put some funds in so we can make sure we have inventory storage of city records offsite moving forward. Municipal facilities, I've kind of touched on this in previous years. Obviously, we need additional office space. I know we've put some money in the seed for a study, even the year before put money in for improvements, but right now, we have a plan. If we were to build a new court office, a new conference room, how we would restructure the admin, finance, and city secretary's office to make it even more effective of when people walk through that door. Right now, one of my goals is to get the walls put up to make sure we have additional offices to function. As the judge said, if we ever get back into this room, the idea is that someone walks through that door, they see the judge, they pay on that door on the side wall, and then they exit out this way. They never don the doors over here. So conference room, obviously we've talked about that. That is something that's a must based on just not only staff requiring meetings, even executive sessions in there, but just having and hosting meetings from outside entities instead of just game planning around that table would be very beneficial. Facilities assessment, audit study. I know, again, we've talked about that, but one of the things we need to look at specifically for this building is an HVAC inventory. One is going down over here, the other is going down over here. We need to be able to plan and schedule the funds appropriately moving forward, at least over a 5-year plan for this building, because it's not only on this side, it's on PD, as the chief said. So we got to be able to carve out funds each year just in case one of those HVACs goes down or we have to replace. I don't think that's ever looked at moving forward. As chief said, Rick gets involved in calling the Rosenberg or whoever it is to come in and take a look at it this time to see what's not functioning correctly. And I just had this feeling one day it might be, we need to replace 1 or 2 because we might have them fail. So we got to put a plan in place for that. Another one is the IT infrastructure, like I touched on. We're working on new IT service. The one we've had has not been the best quality, has not been the best help, and has not been the best as far as advising what our game plan should be for our IT infrastructure for this city. We've talked to a couple IT providers. You get what you pay for. And if we have to pay a little bit more for better quality, better advice, I'm all about that. And I've been asking for a 5-year plan from the current provider on our infrastructure, especially our servers that are in jeopardy of going down here. And so that's one of my goals, to do and fix and put something in place. So every 5 years, we're either looking at leasing a new server or buying a new server. Future contingency, major purchases, obviously we have that in place. As I talked about, HVAC, IT, carpet. One of the goals was to get new carpet in here and in the administration offices. It's 25 years old at least. And then finally, prioritize the seed funding, because I think a lot of these things can be utilized for seed funding. It's just prioritization of what I see in staff that needs to be a priority, and what you and council all see needs to be funded out of the seed as well. If there's projects you have, then I think we need a game plan accordingly with the 400-some thousand that's left in it over the next 5 years. So, any questions? Sorry, I know I went through that pretty quick. Mr. Paul?
Out of that 400-something thousand, we have 55 and just recently 60,000 additional committed. So we're down to probably 300,000, 275.
So roughly, say 430, committed 55, my math, about 375, committed another 60 for the backup. So roughly a little over 300,000.
Right.
moving
Okay.
forward.
So we're speaking for, but as far as what hasn't been committed is approximately a little over 300,000, not 400. Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure I remembered right.
And again, I think what would be in best interest through the proposed to adoption is if we identify projects that are going to come out of the seed next year. First and foremost, I'm going to say that probably we're going to need to spend, 40, 50,000 on improving our IT infrastructure right off the bat.
I strongly recommend that the council, I'm glad you bring that up, because with the inflation potential that everybody's talking about, which is pretty much seems to be set in stone, the sooner we get this done better, and I've been crying about this for 3 years, that we got that money just sitting there. It's not really growing any interest to speak of, so we need to use it and at the cheaper rate and get it done now. And if the IT is one of the things we need to look at.
Well, one of the things with the IT is we talked about is a lease program.
Right.
So we could purchase a new server through a lease. We don't touch it. We don't do any maintenance. We don't do anything. 5 years, they replace it with a new server.
That's
I'm more leaning towards that route. But
let's look at a program.
we're going to
then,
compare accordingly.
Put that on schedule.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Rapley? Mr. Gregory?
I hope we also get a spreadsheet when we get the finalized thing. Tonight, right now, we could be attacked by ransomware and the city could be wiped out. What plans do we have right now to protect ourselves against this ransomware?
Again, our current IT providers have done some things to help prevent that from a cybersecurity standpoint, but I don't think it's the best front in place for us to have that. So I couldn't tell you if we did have it, what would happen. I mean, that's not my area of expertise. My goal is to bring someone up here to tell you exactly what we need to do and how to prevent that in the future in our best effort. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Rapp. I just want to chime in. One of the conversations that you and I have had regarding the encryption system that we'd like to implement here potentially. Full disclosure, I serve on the board of the company. It's a state-supported company, but it's using a card similar to what the government uses. They call it a CAT card, Common Access Card, that you'd insert, which serves as a physical and a logical encryption. So basically, you have to have the card and you have to be able to provide a password. So it's a double layer. On top of that, it also helps quarantine the infection from one component to, as opposed to where somebody might access Mr. Rapley's computer and then get into the whole system. This is something that we had talked about implementing, but Mr. Rapley's hesitation was getting set up with a IT contractor that we are a little more comfortable with investing long-term. And I've assured Mr. Rapley that the organization that I sit on the board for has two prices, one for mission-driven, which is government-related organizations. They sell to FEMA and large-scale companies, entities like that. And then they have private. We would be getting the mission-driven price, given the fact that we're a city.
So the best way to explain it, Councilman Gregory, to answer your question somewhat, I mean, I don't really have an IT background. That's a person who's a lot smarter than I am. But in a nutshell, the way they explained it to us is that our IT platform are all connected. All of our departments are connected on one level. So if something happens over here, over in fire, PD's going down. Other areas are going down because we're all on the same layer. The way they kind of said, you need to be on this nebulous looking. So if one goes down, they can isolate that so it doesn't impact other areas. So if we have a ransom attack, we're susceptible across the board, whereas we can isolate one area, say records and police, so they don't go after another particular area. So starting with improving our IT infrastructure layout for the city is the first and foremost what we need to do.
Mr. Rapley? In the meantime, do we have I would presume this is an obvious, but every night, once a week, we have proper backups on all of our systems so that if we do get malware until we get this thing fixed, we have our backup, our data is backed up. We don't have to pay to get it back.
Yes, I.
Currently, what we do have is we do have a backup system. However, that backup system is located within the building and not off-site. So again, if something would happen, we couldn't get it. Well, what about just until we know what we're doing, find out what's the best for doing? What's the matter is just using the plain old memory sticks and back them up once a week before you go home, all the departments.
I'd say at this point, we probably.
That's old fashioned, but at least it accomplishes it.
Well, I don't think we should be discussing openly, I think just to tell you that we're looking to improve our IT because just from a susceptibility standpoint. So, but I deferred to the chief because he didn't realize that it was police chief / IT director when he took the job. So, and that's something that needs to change because again, Johnny had background in information technology, but we need a standalone expert in that area for this city. And that's what we're doing and moving forward to do and have on board here soon. So
I hope we can engage them sooner rather than later.
we are. And my goal is to have that person from that company here to tell you what the problem is and how we're going to fix it.
Perfect. Any further questions, council? Okay. That concludes our agenda. Do we have any motions? Mr. May.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
First by Mr. May, a second by Mr. Joyce. All in favor? Unanimous. It is 8:34. Meeting is adjourned. Everybody have a good evening.